Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. Great guest again, Michael Kelly. So we're going to do some questions and answers, a bit more into the Essex boys. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
So first question for you, Michael. Can you think of any motives of people that wanted to kill them?
For the last, Tony steadily built into the drugs game and got worse and worse. From 93 to 95, he was full on the gear and full on business involved in drugs. Started off with cannabis, started dealing in cannabis to East London guys, mainly the black yardie types, because that's all they were interested in. And then on to the pills, and then eventually he was trying to get into the cocaine business. Problem was, he started off in cannabis and started selling not dud cannabis, but poor quality, poor grade quality, and trying to charge proper price and trying to mug people off, which you just can't do. And that caused a lot of arguments. Money obviously wasn't paid one way or the other, caused trouble. Tony then would start threatening and abusing people because he couldn't threaten the top guys, so he'd start abusing the lower guys. Kevin Whittaker is a famous example of that. Poor Kevin was only a delivery guy. Everyone thinks he was a big time gangster. He wasn't. He was just a delivery guy for Tony. And he delivered poor grade cannabis, and the people just wouldn't pay for it. They just said no. But also they didn't give it back. So Tony was out the full 60,000, and he went spare. And then of course what happened then is he's trying to recover. So then he's doing other deals, pills deals, threatening dealers to make sure that they sell enough, cocaine deals, trying to do to get bigger chunks of money, which I think is what happened in the end. He was involved in larger consignments. And it's probably what got him to that lane. But in the second time Tate came out, that last 6 weeks, and that's all it was only 6 weeks, they were in full-scale chaos mode between threatening and trying to earn money, and it was just chaos. Most of the friends Tony had, the good doorman he had left, had long abandoned him because he made the mistake of not involving them in the first place. It was all about him. Yeah. Tony was never in the game to make other people wealthy. It was just to make himself wealthy. And he had a partner in Tate who was equally volatile. And he upset a lot of people. So yes, he upset East London yardies, probably East London gangsters when he started dealing with the cocaine, because that was their business. There's rumours, which I didn't know about, but there was rumours that he was robbing people. Now I know he was involved in robbing small-time dealers. That wouldn't have got him killed. But if he stole from a small-time dealer and that gear was from on consignment, yeah, from someone who's waiting for that money, then you're dealing with bigger players. But here's something I'd like to clear up, because on the forums they always have this image of top three big gangsters, you know, the Blundells, the Hunts, Terry Marley's crowd, and even the Adams all the way over the other side of London, that they would be directly involved in dealing with Tucker. It didn't work that way. Those guys usually didn't get their hands dirty. They consigned out large amounts to what I call medium range gangsters, who then consigned it all the way down to the street. And that could be 5 layers. But it's the middle guy. If he's losing out money and he owes it to the bigger guys, he's more likely to want you dead, because he's in trouble himself. Like, I was very friendly with the Hunts. I never had a problem with them. They weren't volatile. They didn't go around threatening. All my business was in Romford and Hornchurch, or all around that area, and that Steve Hunt's area. Never once did he cause me any issues. I've been to dinner over at that house. He was always a decent guy. Those guys don't get involved with the likes of Tucker. Tucker himself was mid-range and he was dealing with other mid-range guys. And those guys aren't rich. So when they lose a hit, it's a big hit and it's trouble. I mean, everyone knows you can be killed for £1,000. If you owe someone 40,000, that's their full focus is you, and that's it. Who did it? I don't know. No one knows. And I think that's the intrigue of the case. He had so many enemies in the end, including Dorman, I know, that it could have come from anywhere. But I still go back to, my theory would be, he went down a lane. None of us could understand it. I did many crazy dealings with crazy people, including the Adams, and it was always in my office, surrounded by about 15, 20 doormen. So they knew if there was any problems, they're not getting out because there was guys there to stop them. I was never ever dreamt of going down the lane to meet anyone. There was no need. If I'm going to do a drug deal, I'll do it in a locked door office like this, and no one can see it. Yeah. No one can stumble by and ring the police because they're seeing something dodgy going on. You're in a lit office. He went there, for certain, in my opinion, to observe where a plane might come down, how they might rob, where would they set up if they were going to rob this plane, where were they going to hide, because it's a field. Not many places in the field you can hide. You have to be in a ditch or something.
A recce visit.
That's exactly what it was. Some people believe it was a drug deal. That's what lured him there. But no, you do it in your office or in their office. You just, you're not agreeing to go down at 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night down a lane. You're definitely not doing it after midnight. So, hence, I think Steele had something to do with it. Whether he shot them, I don't believe it, because Lee Chapman said he knew Steele and Holmes and they didn't have that killer instinct in them. That doesn't say they didn't do it if they weren't threatened. If your life is threatened, and Tucker was threatening. It wasn't just, I'm going to beat you up. It was, I'll kill you. And I think what did for Tucker was the word got out that he was involved in Whitaker's death. So now he's the killer. So if he threatens you, you could believe that he may do that. He may deal a hot shot to you. As to who did it, I don't know. I don't believe in the Patsy Clark theory because the robbery had nothing to do with it. Do you want to ask that question?
I was going to say, obviously, what about the Group 4 robbery? Do you think that had involvement into it?
Well, that is a theory that only came out on the forums about 2 years ago. Now, I was shocked when I heard that because I had actually forgotten about the robbery. And I was part of the door. It was called the Hollywood robbery at the time. There was a lot of chaos and the Sun newspapers were down and trying to interview everyone. And again, of course, the colours the firm because of the craze. Everyone was firm after the craze, you know what I mean? It had nothing to do with Patsy Clark. The robbery was thought out by a friend of mine called Dave Causton. He was a doorman up in Ipswich. And he worked sometimes in Romford. He was part of the Romford crew, and there was about 35 of us, all doormen. And he had worked for Group 4. So he knew the routines, knew where and how much, more importantly, they carried. And they organised the robbery. It went wrong and they got sent down, but they got out on appeal. I can't see any connection to Tucker. He wasn't involved. They didn't involve him in the money. He might have paired them up because he introduced my friends in Romford to Dave Causton, and they planned it out together. And any money that went missing is between them, but Tucker had nothing to do with it. No one trusted Tucker after he stabbed me in the back to hand him money. Also, the robbery happened in '89. It was 6 months before they were arrested. Why would Tucker be given all this money to launder? They could launder it themselves. They didn't need Tucker for any of this. So I think it's a pretty lame theory, but it's a theory.
Next question. Is it true that Tony Tucker made payments to door staff with marked money, sort of die on it?
Yes. That's true. He turned up, because back then, you'd pay the wages in cash. I paid wages in cash back then. There was no real good banking system. It was either a check or cash. And on one occasion, I think it was only one occasion, he came up and the notes were worthless and they were given back to him to say, like, we can't walk into a bank with this. You'll be arrested. Where he got them, I don't know, and I'm not going to conjecture. Was he involved in a robbery to get that? I doubt it. Because back then, everyone everybody on the street was ducking and diving in some way. If fake money came, it would end up in Dorman's hands, to put through the club or, there was always fake money going around. Back in the 90s, there was a glut of it for about 5 years of fake pound coins, fake fivers and fake 20s particularly. He could have just been given a batch of them, 100,000, and say, can you clear these through the clubs? Which is exactly what he was trying to do. Yeah. See, he had Ipswich, Hollywood and Southend. He had a restaurant in Romford, but he had Club UK, which is very dark, and when the money goes over the counter, no one checks it. And you could do it very clearly. So I think he might have just got a consignment of them to do it, but I don't know.
Next question. Did Tony Tucker threaten Bernard over the Ease incident at Beccles?
I don't know specifically he threatened him, but I would believe he did, because he was threatening everyone at the time. I know he was. He was in full-scale panic mode, so yeah, Bernard would have got it. All the Dorman probably did, to tell him to shut up, stay out of it, and keep my name out of it, because Tony was all about himself, and you can all go down, was his attitude, and we learned that about him. It was about himself, saving himself. Tate was volatile enough to threaten anyone. So yes, I believe it, but I don't know, because I didn't know Bernard, and I've never set foot in Raquel's. So it wasn't one of my venues, so I never went there.
Who do you think could have possibly lured them down the lane that night?
I've thought about this. I've seen every theory on the board. I can't see anyone past Steele getting them there. Again, it goes back to, I want to sell you 3 kilos. I think that's what they're saying, 3 kilos cocaine. I'll meet you here. Why would you meet there? I can't get it. I would instantly say, no mate, that's not happening. You'll be here where I'm surrounded by safety and 2 guns. That's it. You're not going down the lane, even if I'm fully armed. And if you did go down the lane and you're dealing with someone you're not really sure of, because he's a gangster, to buy it, you're out of the car. You're out of the car and you're fully armed and you wait for them to come. And you deal the car, like you see in the films. I'm on my car, you're on my car, and we cross over and say, yeah, and you shake hands and you go. You don't sit in a car.
Next question. Did you ever meet Mick Steele and Jack Holmes?
No, never met them. There were regulars in Hollywood Ipswich. So Dave Costman probably knows it, but Lee knew them well. And he said he never believed they had a killer bone in them. You can sort of see, we've met a lot of killers in East London, you sort of see the spark, the danger in them. He doesn't believe it at all that they could have done it. And I'm sort of the belief they could have done it, but I cannot get past Steele luring them there. I just can't. Yeah. Now, he had his own problems with him. Maybe someone else said, like, we'll help each other out here. You get him there and I'll take care of it. I can't be sure of it. I know no more really than the guys watching this, That's just my theory. I don't need to be shot down on it. It's just my own theory.
Did you ever come across Paul Betts?
Yeah.
That was Leah Betts' dad, wasn't it?
Yeah, Leah was the girl who took the pill. I knew Paul well. Paul was our liaison officer in Romford. So any of the problems with the pubs and the clubs, he'd come down and he'd speak to the management and the door staff and find out any problems and tell the management, look, you've got to let this doorman go, or this is, he might be charged. So I had dealings with Paul on a weekly basis, I liked him a lot. He was posh, very fair, very friendly. He'd come down, always said the same thing. Michael, a word, into the office. This happened, this incident happened, we're not happy with that, that can't keep happening, And he'd ask for an explanation. But every time he let it slide, he really was fair to us. When she died, I was now running Secrets. I was manager of Secrets nightclub, and we organised for GMTV Breakfast Time to come down and interview him, his first interview, because at this stage he decided he was going to do a crusade. He was trying to start up a crusade, an anti-drugs crusade, go around to nightclubs, which he did with us. Ours was the first, and go around to schools and just do the whole anti-drugs thing. That's where it started. And unfortunately, it was an obsession for him. And unfortunately, a lot of gangsters didn't like it. And he had to move out of Essex for fear for his family in the end, which was a real pity, yeah. Like he hadn't enough problems as it is, you know. Yeah. And Tucker knew him as well, of course, which was weird, really, you know, when all the circumstances came.
I think we've already touched a little bit on there about a bad cannabis deal.
Yeah, he did a lot of bad cannabis deals, that's all I was saying. It wasn't just one, it was many.
Did you know Carlton, and did him and Tony have a good relationship and also a falling out?
Yes, he knew Tony. From what I've read, they met in Epping Forest in '93. I've met Carlton with him, so yes, I knew they knew each other. Both had medium-sized security companies, so they'd help each other out. Carlton, all his work was based in London or East London, so he never really came to Essex, and he never tried to get doors in Essex. So, but they met, and between the E's and everything else, they had a similar way of going on. Carlton's also quiet, deliberate. You know, he's not crazy, even though the book makes him out to be. But I think that was a slight exaggeration. Carlton's point. He was actually a decent guy. You know, I like him myself. Lee Chapman, not so much. He came in after Tucker's death and tried to continue the security, running the security of Tucker's doors for Hollywood's, but that was never going to happen. One, because Lee was going to get it, and that was a done deal. And two, they didn't want the attention. I mean, the newspaper attention and the radios and the thing was just intense, and no nightclub or bar wanted the bad publicity. It was just horrendous. Particularly, I was Copper's daughter involved. It was just bad news. Like Raquel's itself died a death. People wouldn't let their kids go there, so it just faded away within a year, you know, because they just couldn't recover from it, you know. Did Carlton fall out? I don't think so. I think they sort of remained, but you got to understand Tony's point of view. Tony used people for his benefit. Yeah. He liked big, giant, dangerous guys. For a while, I think Carlton was just someone else that was on the same track as him, and he made him look good hanging around him. They're all big guys together, the same. I think when Tate came along, Carlton faded because now he got a bigger monster. He got Frankenstein as his plaything. Down the line, he would have let Tate go as well. As I said, all along, there's a whole list of people, doormen and friends that he just cast aside. Because they were no longer earning him anything or doing anything for him. So on to the next. I just think that's all it was. I don't think they had a major falling out.
Just when it benefited him.
I just think he sent all I'll say is this. He sent Carlton to get some money from people I know. Because he wasn't afraid to do it himself. And Carlton was told where to go in no circumstances. Like, he was laughed out. And Carlton, I think, was smart enough to realise, I don't want to be around this real, you know, it's getting deadly now, and he's in the middle of it. And I think he may have pulled back, and I think Tony may have pulled forward because he was heavily on the drug. Carlton himself says Tony was getting wired all the time. Carlton wasn't following that route. Yeah. He liked a bit of pills here and there, he liked it, but he wasn't going to go do laddie on it and spend all his time on it. So I think it was a bit of both. Tucker had his fill with him, and Carlton, I think, pulled back. There's a mixture of that.
Yeah, just sort of separated a little bit. Next question. Where do you think the Essex boys were on the night of the shooting, between 7 PM and 8 AM?
They were in a Range Rover down the lane.
Final question from me, Michael. In your own opinion, who do you think could have possibly killed the Essex Boys?
Any number of East London gangsters, and I mean mid-range ones now. I think everyone is concentrating on. I just have no doubt the Hunts had nothing got to do with it. It's just way above their pay grade. Blundell's, they were long out of the game. They were just suppliers at that time. They didn't get involved in all of that. Now, they would have known about it if it was coming, but I think mid-range gangsters dealt with him. I think they got Mickey Steele to bring them there to do it. I do believe it came from East London, but that's about it, really. You know, it could have been a number of characters, because there was a lot of people he upset that I don't know about. You know, he was like a scattergun. He was very arrogant, and he wasn't listening to anybody, and he wasn't being told what to do by anyone. You know, if he had got another 5 years of that, like he would have been, he would have been unreadable. You know, because he wouldn't have cared about anything then. He'd have been too big to talk to. And that was his undoing. I think he was always had a severe need to be rich, and if there was a lure of a big payday, he would have gone for it. He wouldn't have sat back and analysed it and thought, you know, let's play the safe route. No, he'd have gone in, and that's what got him there. But who? I can't say. You know, Mickey Steele could be innocent, and you know, I believe they should get out. You know, he has an appeal. I don't see how he's a danger in his 70s, you know.
Yeah, plus he's also done his time now.
He has done his time. And if he's innocent, you know, it's a horrible, he lost his life, really, you know, for something he may not have done. No one knows, and I don't think it's going to be solved, because if the gangsters did it, let's say now, it was Mickey Steele. It wasn't Mickey Steele, it was the gangsters. Someone would have talked. You make friends and then you make enemies. You know? I always had this rule. Keep it very close, because I can tell you, because you're my friend, that I've committed this robbery. Then you tell your friend. Because you trust him.
Chinese whispers,
yeah, but after he tells his friend, that friend hates me. Not everyone's friends with me, and that's how it gets out. That's how the robbery, I think, resulted in getting out, because too many people knew. And, you know, friends were friends of friends. And that's how it is. I would have believed that if some low-grade Jasper type guy, whether it was Gale or any of those, now people would go on a podcast and talk about it. Yeah. When they do that in America, the mafia are talking about their crimes, that they're friends with, because they're not friends with them anymore. They hate them, and they're on podcasts doing it. That's John Elite is doing it. He went down with the American mafia, and now he's talking about all the crimes they did. Because fame seems to be more important now than hiding. They don't go into witness protection anymore. They go on podcasts. So it would have come out just for the fact of the fame. Someone would love to come out and say, "Well, actually, no, this is what happened. You know, put me on a podcast, get me on TV." You know. So that's why I think it always goes back to Steele. You know. Yes, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but there's a lot of. He was in places he shouldn't have been. There was a lot of evidence, but just bits. So it's a strange case, you know. Yeah. And the movies, the Foot Soldier movies, keep it going.
Well, just while we mentioned the movies, what's your opinion of realistic to the movies?
10%.
10%?
Oh, it's outrageous. They had, in the last one, which I was eager to see, was Hollywood's. Because he came to Hollywood, so this is where he started. But in the film, he saves the grandson of the owner or something from being beaten up, and they offer him 10% of the door of 10%. Was it 10% or 20% of the door in Raquel's? I mean, that doesn't happen in a heartbeat. I'm lucky to get the wages I'm trying to get for the doorman. No one comes and says, "Mick, come over and take my club on here, you know, and I'll give you 20%. I'd have been a very wealthy man if they'd done that. Hollywood was outrageous. It was one thing I didn't like about the films is that I still feel for Tony, and I knew some of the girls who went out with, and some of his friends, and the family, is that every film's the same. He's a screeching monster, and he was nowhere near that. He was very clever, very thoughtful, and he planned everything out, you know. I just think in the last 6 months, his thought process had gone from the air, and he wasn't able to see the wood from the trees. And that's how, a year or two before that, he'd have never been caught like that.
Yeah.
Drugs do that to you, you know, you're getting wired, you're getting angry, you're just, you know, and he just couldn't see it. Yeah. And I'm sure people told him this, you know, the Blundells famously called him in to try and calm him down. That could have been his way out. Maybe that was the last day, you know, stop now, whatever it is, and change, but he never did. Other people told him. I told him. My friend Nev told him. He didn't care, you know. He was on his own path, and that was it. But he wasn't the screeching lunatic at films, which is really, really annoying. That's Terry Stone. He was called Terry Turbo when he did One Nation. That's how he spoke. That's how he always screamed. You know, he was a wannabe gangster himself, and he was always F this and F that. Tony never did that. He very rarely cursed. I very rarely cursed. Lee Chapman was a fairly well-educated door. You know, we weren't just these monsters going around that the papers at the time made out us to be. But the films are sold.
A bit of entertainment.
Yeah, you can. As someone said to me, you know, I can't write a book about the time I watched Coronation Street all night. You know, no one wants to hear about that. Yeah. They want to be hear about the people you beat up or the ones you shot or stabbed and things. You know. Yeah. You know, I got stabbed.
And decorations.
Yeah, I got shot at 4 times. Got stabbed 8 times. That's just nearly every doorman has that story. I know loads of doormen have those stories. You know, one of my friends. I'll just tell you before we go. One of my doorman friends, he was badly stabbed up. He was stabbed up 5 times in a nightclub. He survived. He was so crazy he wouldn't go to hospital. So the police came to interview him. He says, they were looking at me. Are you okay? I went, yeah. He says, where have you been stabbed? I heard you got stabbed loads of times. He says, yeah. I got stabbed once over there, once over there, once over there. That's part of the game. We don't care. Like, even down in Basel 10 years later, and it had all been cleaned up and tidied up, Basel, and it had gone reasonably civilized, because I had a huge door team. I had about 45 working in Basel. Still, these guys from East London came over, got knocked back, that's all, no fight, nothing, just got knocked back. No, that's not happening. Pull up, going on, shot the door, point blank in the leg. You know? He's been hobbling ever since, yeah. So it was a very dangerous game in the end, especially when the guns came. The guns followed the knives. And then it was time, to get out. Yeah, it was just getting more miserable, and everyone's fighting for a smaller and smaller pot. Yeah. Then the nightclubs started dying off. Like, of all the nightclubs I had in Essex, not one is there now. They're all turned into flats.
I think most of London and Essex
has
gone now, isn't it?
Yeah, because a nightclub will give you maybe $500,000 a year in profit, but into the 2000s, suddenly the land it's sitting on is worth 20 million, you know. Yeah. And then what they did was they brought a law out there about 10 years ago where they could extend the height of these tower blocks. So now you could build a 20-story tower block of flats, and now the property just went boom. Yeah. And nightclubs just were knocked down overnight.
Industry, though. I think even this online dating now, people used to go and meet a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whatever. Now they do all this online Tinder stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
Go out to the clubs for that. So.
Yeah, you don't go out and meet anymore. You don't chat with bird. Yeah, I've seen it actually where they're in clubs and they're actually texting across the counter. So you know, say, it's not my era. I don't care. I love the era it was, and I broaching on that. My son has now grown up in this era. He's the age I was when I was working there, and I now really appreciate that we didn't have oversight. We didn't have cameras everywhere watching our every move. Every time the doorman went into a round out, all the phone cameras come out, you know. We didn't have to deal with any of that. And even the policing was a lot looser. All they decided was, are you a good guy and were you doing it for the right reason? That was enough. Today, no, you're in a fight, you're both arrested. Yeah. There was, it was called lazy policing, Come and investigate. At least in our day, they used to come and ask us, and then they'd go and ask the other guy. And then they'd make a decision, I'm lying and he's not, or he's lying and I'm not. You don't get that anymore, We had freedom at least back then. And part of it too, there was bobbies on the beat then, and they had to be. So they relied on us sometimes to help them. So they tried to be friendly with us, and I always made it a case of be friendly with them. I had a few rules. Be friendly with the police, because one day we may go over the top and they'll turn a blind eye, and that's the day you wanted them to do that. But also you help them out. And the other one was none of my guys were allowed work for the Blundells or any of the gangsters, the Hunts, any of them, because I didn't want information getting back and forth and knowing my business. And it made it easier for me. And I didn't get involved in drugs, so I didn't have to deal with that side. I just had to deal with the everyday stupidity, and there was a lot of it.
Enough of that on its own.
There was enough of that on its own, yeah.
And Michael, we start winding it up there. Thank you ever so much for coming and sharing your story.
You're welcome.
It's been appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.